All right, hello and welcome to ETalk.TV. Today we have a very special program for you today. We're going to be talking with Joanne Richards and talking about the deep secret space programs and a lot of other stuff that she has information on. Today I'm going solo. My co-host Scott Karamanis, sorry Scott, I didn't mean to butcher your name. He's not with us today. He's actually on the other side of the state, so I'm going to run solo without him, and we're going to have a great show today. So I want to thank you, Joanne, for coming on and being part of the show today. You are, as you know, our first guest.
Yay! Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you being on the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself because you know you better than I know you.
Oh, well, that's fine. Sure. I am executive director of a nonprofit here in the San Francisco Bay Area called Earth Defense Headquarters. And no, we're not promoting war, but we're sorry. It's tax season. What can I say? Um, we like to share little known information about history and other special topics like a lot of history, a lot of military history, creative arts, magic, cryptozoology, all kinds of weird, all kinds of weird stuff, as I put it. My husband and his father were high-level military intelligence, so I get a lot into, the military history, what they do with the UFOs and a lot of alien species over the years, since way back when. And so my husband has provided lots of information for me to do that with, and we have several reports that the nonprofit sells, and I go around speaking as often as I'm asked to, so that's a lot of fun. I love that. Share, I used to do a TV show. I did a lot of radio interviews, so I have email. I'm happy to chat with anybody, so I'm just happy to get the information out there to as many people as want to listen.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. And then, so how did you kind of start your journey onto this? Is that from meeting Mark, or is this something you were investigating beforehand?
Oh. um, I like I tell people, I grew up in the 50s watching Martian movies and things like everybody else did, and then I kind of forgot about ETs and aliens and UFOs, and then I met Mark in the late 90s, and after a couple of years or more than that, it wasn't right away. Um, he started providing reports for me because I had a little publishing company, so he provided some reports for me that I could start selling, and I didn't start reading them right away. And then he gave me one or two that I needed to start typing because it was handwritten. And then he said, "Why don't you go to this UFO conference?" Like, okay. and see if anybody's talking about reptilians. Okay. And by then I knew a little bit about his military past, and by the next year I was having my own booth at the Bay Area UFO conference. So, but again, his information has come to me over time. He didn't just plop 20 or 30 reports on me because he's writing constantly, and he didn't have them all ready to go when he first started having me do this. So, I started with the first report he gave me was like the Dulce base, a report he helped edit for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I didn't read it right away, probably till a year after I had it. And I know, and then people are going, "Oh, do you know what's in this?" I go, "No." "Just read this. This is really scary." It's like, okay. And that's funny because that's what most people wanted to hear on the radio when I did a lot of my first interviews. But the first other report about one of his missions was about a mission in space and a space battle. It's like, oh, that's interesting.
So I got to ask you real quick. I don't mean to interrupt you, but when you first started to read this, what were you thinking? I mean, if you come from a normal background and then all of a sudden you start reading this, so you have to, be thinking something.
It's really kind of strange because by then I'd known him for several years, and we had developed such a trusting relationship, and I already knew that he was a big researcher, and he was working on a family history, so I was already used to helping, research a little background here and there, and I was used to his voluminous writing. And there's evidence all around the house that the family's been all over the world or many places around the world doing, just being stationed for the military. So the background, what he's been telling me where his family had lived and whatever, that was all. I can prove it by the stuff around the house. so by the time I read, oh, he's been in space. Oh, okay. It was so weird because it's like it didn't faze me at all. It's like what fazed me more was that, oh, he almost just got killed again and again and again. Every mission, it's like, oh, his ship just got rammed. Oh, his ship just got. And this is out in space where things explode quickly, but he's managed to survive many, 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 many times. So it's like, oh, that's the harder part. It's like, you just almost died again, and now the next year, and now the next year, and now you're wounded again. It's like, yeah. So that was the hardest part. But believing him, I actually had no problem with that, which sounds weird, I know, but intuitively, I know that he's telling me the truth.
Amazing. And so, do you mind telling us a little bit about his background and his family's background? Because from what little I know, I find it very interesting.
Well, it's interesting. Both of his grandfathers worked with Nikola Tesla on various projects. Um, his maternal grandfather was one of Teddy Roosevelt's Rough Riders, and he became like one of the first Men in Black / Secret Service guys. The other grandfather ran an electronics like college or whatever. He was also on a lot of think tanks. He did a lot of work with the president. They were both murdered. Uh, and Mark's dad used to spend summers with various scientists, including Tesla and Goddard and Hubble and all these cool guys. I know. Ron, and he was actually testing Tesla's uh, uh, projects for him. So he was like testing submarine things and like the death ray thing and all kinds of weird stuff. So, Mark's family is basically Germanic and English, or everything from the UK, the British Isles, and very Germanic.
So,
And it's really
do you
nice.
mind if I ask this really quick?
No, no.
So, with that relation of the family and the deep space programs and all of that, I know there's definitely been speculation that Tesla was, contacted by
Yes,
other
yes,
beings. Is
yes.
there any mention of that?
Tesla was communicating with aliens since the 20s. I know that. The other thing I'm now allowed to say is that when Tesla was about to be killed, he called my father-in-law and his dad to his hotel, and they knew he was a bit eccentric, and that he was paranoid a lot. But he said, somebody's gonna get me soon. Oh, you're crazy. You're nuts. It'll be okay. No, here, take my black books or take my notebooks and protect them. So they got a good portion of his secret notebooks that the government did not get, and they've been in the care of Mark's family for since then. And I don't know where they are. They're not on my property. He's promised me that, so I'm allowed to live.
That makes you sleep a little easier at night.
Somewhere. But yeah, he said definitely that Tesla used to communicate with aliens. So
So let me
that's
ask
pretty
this
cool.
then, which type of, I mean, actual physical contact, or was he more channeling in the information,
Uh, I
or a
don't
little of
know.
both?
I think it would probably be more channeling, but don't quote me on that because I don't. We haven't had a long discussion on the logistics of that.
Okay, okay.
But
I'm just curious, as again, with my spirituality and stuff,
and it's interesting because most of Mark's experience. I mean, Mark can telepathically communicate with aliens and probably holographically, whatever. Mark has a lot of in-person experience with lots of different aliens. So, he's been around them. They've been around him since he was a baby. He's been around them for a very long time, different kinds. So,
beautiful. And yeah, I'd like to get that into that as well too. I don't know. I probably cut you off on talking about his family a little bit, but I just wanted to get that info on Tesla.
so they have really nice bloodlines, so that's always kind of fun to read. When you're going back and saying, oh, German princes and blah blah blah. So they just have some really good bloodlines. I know one of his mother's mother, she's related to the Williams that founded, or like the first governor of Rhode Island and stuff. So some fun family names pop up. So that's kind of nice. both of his parents are gone, and he has no siblings. He has some cousins that, I'm not in touch with, stuff like that. So he's loved being an only child. And he grew up in a military family. His dad was career Air Force, and his mother was a good officer's wife. And they've lived here in Northern California at several bases. They lived in Ohio for a while. They lived in Michigan for a while. They were stationed in England and France for a while, like in the early 60s. I know when Mark, before they moved to England, his dad was stationed in Pakistan and off the planet for like 18 months when Mark was like 5, 6. So his dad's had quite the experience. And his dad, he was stationed pretty much anywhere there was a UFO alien activity going on. And I've got all his military orders, and you can see the places he went and kind of tie them to where things were going on, whether it was public knowledge or not. So that's kind of interesting to read. And his dad, it's funny because people ask me, well, it's like, we can't find any record of the two of them. It's like, well, what they did, everything they did was top secret. So you're not going to find their records. You're not going to find pictures of them standing around I've got one great picture of Mark's dad by his airplane, but you're just not going to see them in the middle of what they were doing. So sorry, people, but that's the way it is.
Yeah,
Top
they
secret.
probably take that away. What's
Yeah.
that?
Top secret is top secret for a reason. Mark grew up with higher military clearances than the president ever has. So, it's just the way it is. His dad was always military intelligence. His dad was doing errands and alien stuff. There was a time in the 40s when there was a lot of alien activity in the American Southwest, like the beginning of when the Dulce base was going to be built and before we got into World War II. And his dad was a teenager, and his dad was busy doing something else, so Mark's dad had to go to the American Southwest and help deal with that. So that was interesting. And just like his dad, Mark was dealing with alien things when he was a teenager, and he was around them, like I said, when he was a kid. So let's see. Mark did some Navy training when he was still in high school. He worked for Lockheed, helping them with their secret projects that they were having trouble with when he was still in high school, and he was getting paid for it. He joined the Army like right out of high school and went to Vietnam as a chopper pilot, came out as an Army lieutenant. After at some point he went over back into the Navy, and at some point a few years later he was a Navy captain. So publicly his rank is Navy captain.
Was he in Vietnam because of the activity there during Vietnam?
Which activity would that be?
Well, I've just heard some rumors about some activities in Vietnam.
One of the main reasons we were in Vietnam were because there was alien problems there, and because there was a portal that we needed to keep control of, and they wanted control of. So there was some nasty alien stuff going on that now I'm allowed to admit to people. And about the time I started admitting to that, that thankfully other people were coming forward, especially, and I've met some veterans who said, oh, I saw these things, there were like big insects there. But then I was thinking, oh, those were the Viet Cong lying there dead. It's like, no, they were the big insect things, that had just been killed and piled up.
So is that what is it, the Trogs or something? Is that the?
Yeah, you're right. Ooh, you
Okay.
do research. Good job.
Well, I try to.
Good
I,
job.
I want to find the truth out for me, or at least have a type of understanding.
And one of the things I love about this work is that, again, like most people, I was just kind of going along and doing my life, and the stuff that my eyes have been open to, that's like, oh, this was really going on under everybody's noses. And it doesn't, yes, it's a little scary to know how many times the Earth, aliens have tried to invade the Earth, not just in the 50s, like in the 70s and 80s, and even probably now. But there's a lot of scary alien activity going on now. But it's just amazing what's gone on, and people have no clue. But
Yeah.
most people think they can handle it, but the government knows that most people can't handle it. So.
That's what I tell people too. Some of my friends is like, "Oh, I can't wait for contact." It's like, really? I was like, "Come on now, really, really think about that. when you realize that there's other beings that basically have more technology higher up in that way than us, your whole life will change. It's no longer just going to work and doing your everyday thing. Everything will change from that moment on.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to imagine that pretty much I would say every species out there is going to be older than us and more advanced than us. So to them, most of them don't think of us as sentient beings. So, we're just little rodents here taking up space.
Well, that's one thing I definitely want to get into here in a little bit. Like I was saying before, I don't want to jump from thing to thing really. I did want to find out if it was the Trogs and wondering about Vietnam there. But if you don't mind, can you continue a little bit more about Mark because it is such a fascinating life that he's been living.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, the man can fly pretty much anything, like different kinds of aircraft and spacecraft. He can fly human military aircraft and spacecraft. He was part of the Aurora Project and other things that are more top secret. He has flown a few different, at least two or three different kind of alien craft that I know of. He has a personal alien craft that is his, basically his. She's hiding somewhere, but she only lets him fly her, and anybody else that tries will just be killed. So, he's got his own personal spacecraft, and some of the craft that he's flown for other species are just really cool. So,
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, and that's something I want to get into too. I guess I don't know. Do you feel we covered everything we need to on Mark right now? Because there is some things I'd like to talk about with the evolution on certain species.
we'll wrap that part up. It's like he what do you want to say? He's been in space. He's been underwater for different alien things and whatever. I mean, he can speak several. Well, I know of a couple of different alien languages he can speak. So he's phenomenal, and he can communicate telepathically with species if that's the case.
And
So
is telepathic more of a normal way for each species to talk to each other? So
I
there's not that language barrier, or would there still? I mean, I wouldn't feel there's a language barrier there. Would there be?
depends. I think several of them do speak telepathically, or they'll have. People just want to call them fairies. I call them elementals. They often have their own elementals with them, coming with them from their planet or their homeworld, that will help translate. Sometimes the species use the Greys to translate for them, and sometimes you learn their language. I mean, Mark can speak fluent Raptor, and I know he can speak one oceanic species language. I don't know which species, um, and I don't know what else he can speak. So those are the two that I know of.
So since you're on that subject, because I was wondering earlier today myself, I'm like, okay, well, does a raptor have the vocal cords to speak like us, or do we even have the vocal cords to make their sounds?
No, they have a very guttural, clicky, growly. It's really cool because he started speaking to me, or like just making their noises so I can hear what. But he does speak to me a little bit sometimes in their language. Um, and it's, as for, I don't want to call it primitive, but as dinosaurish, as animalistic as it sounds, it's really amazingly beautiful. Um, the more elite of the raptors will have operations on their voice boxes so that they can speak human languages, and a lot of them, and their language is it's really easy for them to speak German more than English. And he was talking to me about their language, last week, and I don't think it's that. I mean, I go, well, maybe I want to learn how to speak Raptor. It's like, come on, someday I want to meet them, but
Is it
um,
harder than Klingon?
I don't know if it might sound like Klingon, but it's just amazing. And what was I going to say? But I think maybe sometimes humans might be able to have their voice boxes altered a little bit too, if they want to make it easier to speak their language. But apparently, it's not a super complicated language. But you and I, like, yeah, try and speak it. And it's not like they have the same alphabet or anything like we do. And maybe there's just key sounds. I don't know a lot about it yet. I know it sounds pretty cool when it's
Awesome. I can imagine it probably would.
hard to describe.
Well, since we're on the Raptors, let's continue with that then, because I'm really curious about a lot of this. One, since they're originally here on this planet, I could imagine them evolving and stuff, and leaving. But I'm just curious, why would they leave the planet? Or if they didn't really leave, why would they go in hiding and allow us to take over this planet in the way we have?
Oh, that was never their plan. They they originated here, like we've said, 65 million years ago. Well, no, even more than that. They left millions of years ago. A huge contingency left to go colonize space because they're all about empire, and they love having a huge empire, which they do in our arm of the galaxy. And so they went to colonize space because of space, time, whatever, the science part of it. They thought they'd only been gone maybe a few thousand years. They've been gone millions of years. 65 million years ago, a huge asteroid hit the Yucatan Peninsula. There were some of their species that were left like underground on Mars and on the moon. They had bases in all those places. They evolved into a more human-looking reptoid. We call them reptoids, and they're totally different agendas. They're nasty, awful. We can talk about them later.
Okay, so just so I can get that straight really quick, reptoids are just a different evolved species than the raptors. Or
For some reason, they evolved to be more human-like. Most of them don't have their tail. They walk upright. They still have just the three toes and the kill claws, that kind of thing, but they don't have the long snout like the raptors still do. The raptors still, and I sent you a picture, the raptors still look like a dinosaur, and they're very proud of that. They're beautiful dinosaurs. So, but anyway, they have a vast empire out in space. They have terraformed several planets or moons, and I don't know where it is exactly. It's kind of near, if anything can be near each other in space, it's kind of near where the Draco Empire is. But it's out there, and they've conquered other species. They've gone to war with other species. But they love having a big empire. Their empire is run by an empress, and the current empress is a friend of Mark's. He met her when he was 6 or 7, and she was like a preteen or a teenager by then, and so he knows who she is. Her brother was Mark's best friend, so anyway, so he knows who she is, and so that's kind of cool to know. But anyway, and they have several bases here on Earth still. I mean, they came back to Earth and were horrified that we had populated the Earth so much, and it's like, oh, when we left, you were little rodents, and look at you now, and you've harmed the planet because we don't take very good care of our planet, and they're very environmentally friendly. So they grow things. They don't necessarily they won't manufacture anything here. If something needs to be manufactured, they do it off the planet and then bring it here. And
oh,
they steal
wow.
a lot of technology, but and they've got great family values, and they have great spiritual values too. So, but they're designed for running and hunting and eating live prey and food, but like I said, they have strong family values and strong empire values, and
Well, I would definitely like to come back to some of that. One thing I'm very curious at, and every time I've talked to a friend or somebody about this subject, they're like, "Well, how do they fly the ship with their claws and everything like that?" So, I mean, I have no doubt that they can evolve in different ways, but it makes me wonder how do they get around that?
well, they have opposable claws, so they can grasp things just like you and I.
Okay.
Um, and I'm sure, and I'm not sure totally, they can probably, navigate their craft with a mind thing. Like Mark, one of his alien crafts is totally mind communication. He doesn't like use, hand controls or anything like that. He just tells her, thinks, and she knows what to do. And I'm sure, who knows? Again, we don't always get into the mechanics of how things. I mean, he may he's a guy. He likes to describe all that. I don't necessarily pay all attention to that. I should probably pay attention. But again, the raptors can grasp things with their hands, so it wouldn't be beyond their capability to use their paws to use hand controls, things like that, if they needed it.
Yeah, okay. I was just curious. Yeah, I didn't know they had
Yeah,
the thumb on there.
yeah. Well, it's not a thumb; it's a claw.
Okay, the thumb claw. Yeah.
And I have a great drawing of one of his female raptor friends with her. She's holding onto her assault rifle, so you can. It's just one example of you can see them, easily holding on to something. So it's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, I would just think it would be kind of hard to manufacture things, but then that's coming from me, and who
They
knows?
also like to steal a lot of stuff. They'll steal technology and then adapt it for their own uses. But they're very intelligent. So
Okay, yeah, I wouldn't put it past them.
computer.
So let's talk a little bit then about the family values because that's one thing I definitely find fascinating, and I mean, never really thought of when I've went to some speeches and lectures and stuff. I never thought about that family value on that other end until I listened to Clifford Stone one day, and it was just like, oh, I never thought about that. But yeah, I'm sure they're just like us at their home planet. And so, what is it like for that?
They Well, I know for one, you basically have to have permission to breed, so that's one thing. But when you do have your kids, they lay eggs, sit on the eggs, hatch the eggs. Sometimes, if you're a runt and you're afraid of the thing being weak, you eat the kid. But beyond that, um, but beyond that, they believe in educating their children. Education is very important to them. Family is very important to them. um, Raising well-behaved children is very important to them. So if you've just done something bad and you've embarrassed your parents, they might smack you upside the head. They might grab your tail and bang you up and down, or
Give you a
throw you
tail whip?
against the wall. Well, they'll grab your tail and then throw you against the wall. And Mark's even like seen them throw their kids out the window, but they're tough, and most of them survive this. And if not, well, you're weak. You're weak. So but they have lots of children, so in their mind, there's probably a few to spare. A few to spare. But from everything I hear, they love their children, and they not everybody, but like especially if you're in the more elite, the males might have a harem. So it's and maybe a multi-species harem, but it's like you got a village to help raise your children. And you might have cousins come help you sit on the nest while you're waiting for the eggs to hatch, or helping you with the huge brood you just had, or things like that. So it takes a village to help raise their kids, from what I understand.
Beautiful, beautiful. So just okay, now their relationship with us, okay? They come back and they find us all here millions of years later. Why didn't they just, take us out right then? Why did they allow us to stay here? Why, I mean, where
They
was
used
that
to,
compassion?
they used to eat us a lot. Uh, Mark's dad met Prince Naga in 1952 when a contingency of the Raptors showed up at Hamilton Air Force Base, just not far from where I live. It's where his dad was stationed in Nevada for a while. And he's a prince. It's actually his daughter that is now the Empress. And he was sent by the current Empress at that time to be an ambassador to Earth, and to, she thought, well, it's time, it's a good time to become allies with the humans, or see if that's going to work. And so he was sent here to be our ally. He talked with the military people that were there in Hamilton for several days, teaching them things. And he and Mark's dad became really good friends. And then later on, as Mark got older, Mark met him like in 1961 when he was at a conference in England. Yeah, they came back in like the 50s, and they were here before that. But I know in the 50s they came here, they met Mark's dad, and he basically taught them to stop eating us. So the rule is they're not supposed to eat us just for fun anymore. And they're not supposed to think of us as prey. Now, if they're in combat with somebody, um, they're going to eat you because you're the enemy.
So I'm just curious, who makes these rules out there that these beings abide to?
Sometimes there's treaties made. either privately or when they get together for big conferences. I know Mark's been at 2 big conferences, one when he was a young boy and one as a young adult when he was doing security for that. And huge treaties are set up between the various species and the human governments. And then sometimes, like in the earlier years, the species, just different species would meet, like with a president or something like that, and that's when earlier treaties were signed. But especially the bigger treaties are when they have these big conferences.
So the first thing that's coming up to me, you might not have this question here, but these other beings, if they're, loving or whatever, I know, the emotions range all on different species all over the place.
Right.
Now, what was I just trying to get at? God, now I just totally lost my train of thought of where I was going with that too. I thought it was pretty deep.
Do they all want to be our friends? No. Do some of them want to be our friends? Yes.
Well, we'll just go on that then too. I mean, how do we determine that? I mean, who's really being our friends and why? I mean, are there benevolent people that realize you know, the way nature is and just tries to have that free will in nature, or what?
Yeah, well, we still exercise our free will. They don't always want us to have our free will. But there are some species there's a certain species, a dog species who has a base here. They're merchants. They just want to trade. They'd love to trade with us, but they're not allowed to. And they just export products out to space. There are other species who come here as scientists and just want to explore, and some just want to come do science experiments, not necessarily on us. Some just want to come here for vacation. There are others who want to control the planet and control us. There are some who come and kidnap people and ship us out to space for bad things. So it just depends entirely on the species. So
And
who
then
knows what they will.
I'm sure even within the species, there's might be some good ones, some bad ones.
Right, right. And there's different factions within the species because we might have a treaty with, some where we're supposed to be their allies, and yet another faction of them is coming here to invade the planet. But there are treaties in place to ban open communication between humans and aliens. That's why a lot of them don't just land in your, you know,
And
try to
what
come say hello.
and that reminds me of my question again, and then I just want to know why. I mean, why do they take our government's words and sign treaties with them when that's not our decision and our choice in the public? I don't think. Uh,
Part of the problem is most of us are not going to know how to communicate with them. So I have this fabulous quote that I do not have memorized, but it's like, what do you do if, number one, basically that you can't speak their language and they can't speak yours, and you look like lunch to them. So, or what if you like, and another example is, if we were head of state and we were having a big dinner or something with heads of states from many countries, the president or whoever might need to know how to say at least hello, how are you, in those many languages just from around this planet. So imagine you have a conference and you're the host, like the Shah of Iran was in 1971. He had to learn how to say hello at least to many, a couple of hundred or so species of aliens. And if you say it wrong, you might be telling that alien that they're the ugliest thing you've ever seen. And then you're starting an intergalactic incident. So I don't want, Mr. Friendly Slug there who thinks I might be looking like lunch, and I might just have told him he's the ugliest, stupidest thing on the planet when I thought I was telling him, hi, how are you? It's nice to meet you. They're not going to understand why I can't say something properly to them. So, and that,
yeah, and I totally get that. That we, not most people just can't communicate with them.
right.
Uh, but yeah, I just don't want my government responding for me.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. And that's probably what, pissed a lot of people off about Mark, because he didn't always follow the set rules. Sometimes he thought, well, he usually thinks outside of the box. And if he knows a particular rule or order might not be the best way to do things, he's going to find the better way to do something. So, not everybody's happy with the way he used to do things, and he's also pissed off people in the New World Order, and that the shady people who really want to run things anyway. So that's a whole nother story. But it's a very complicated process to try and negotiate and communicate with things that don't speak your language, and one of the things he said when he started meeting them as a kid is some of the scariest looking ones are the friendliest ones. So you can't assume just because they've got big scary teeth and big claws or they look really weird that they're going to be unfriendly. So, just like meeting a different human from another country, we can't assume just by the way they look or talk, that they're a certain way.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So let's get into some of the different races that are around here and that are kind of a direct influence on this planet, or that are visiting here
Sure.
constantly to where it really affects us as a race.
Right. Well, I mean, you do have a lot of grays that come here. Um, the Raptors have several bases here, and they are our allies, and they do work with our military, and they do help our military today. They
So
do defend the planet.
I'm sorry, what was that?
They do help defend the planet.
Okay, awesome. So since you mentioned the grays, I have heard that there's at least three different types of grays. Do you know about that, or do you know about how many there are and the different types they are?
Mark's mentioned about six, and I think it's the Zeta Reticuli are probably the most common, or they're involved with a lot of kidnappings. There's others that are cloned. I think there are different colors of the grays, and some do work. Some are our allies and work with us, but a lot of some of them, maybe it's especially the Zetas, work with other species. Like as an intermediary, because the grays are very sterile, um, so they're not so worried about germs. There's a big concern about germs. Aliens don't want to get our germs. We don't want to get their germs. So the grays are often acting as an intermediary.
So are most grays clones, or are they a species, or is it a difference?
Yeah, I don't know how many would be considered clones or what.
I mean, like,
You know,
would the different types of races of the grays, one type be more of a clone type, one be more of a regular biological species, or what?
so I think so because he made it sound like there's different types of grays, and some are clones and some aren't. So
Yeah, and I'm just trying to figure that out because of some of the stories I've heard, and some I've heard from people that, I mean, after meeting them and listening to them, I definitely trust what they're saying or
right.
have a belief in there. So I just want to try to weigh those out to see, because that counteracts what some other people say that I definitely have belief in as well too. And so I just want to weigh those out on what the possibilities are.
Yeah, it's fun because the grays are probably one of the ones I know the least amount about.
Well, that's fine because we want to find out about the other ones as well too. So,
Talked about the reptoids. The other kind of reptilian he's talked about are the Dracos, which he doesn't talk a lot about, but they're definitely from off planet and they're pretty nasty. And sometimes the more elite of the Dracos have the little wings and stuff, um, but they're pretty nasty, and they do come here and work with. Sometimes it's a government they're working with. I mean, and alien species in general. Sometimes it's a government. Sometimes it's like just an elite civilian group, like a big nasty corporation. Like Bechtel. I love to rag on Bechtel.
it's the second time I've heard that name today, actually.
Murdoch came up in one of Mark's reports as being a New World Order type guy working with a specific alien species, and I don't remember which one at that particular time, but it's quite interesting because sometimes you have corporations making deals, and sometimes you have governments making deals, and this China might work with this particular kind of alien. Russia might be working with a different one. We're working with a different one. The Reptoids, for example, work with ISIS right now. They are backing ISIS, and they're backing the guy in North Korea. So a lot of terrorism terrorist activity or because of them and some other nasty species. There's, I'm very convinced that there's a lot of negative alien activity going on in the Middle East right now.
In the Middle East?
Yeah, like Syria.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, I can imagine that as well too, because yeah, they
Yeah,
come here and influence us to, go one side every other. Yeah.
right.
Um,
Yeah, and you want to know about other ones. I mean, like I've said, there are numerous cat species. I know like 2 different cat species. One Mark met on a mission in space, and they're like 9 feet tall. They like to dye their fur, and they have wings. They do a humming telepathic thing. They're very lovely sounding, and uh, some of them are here on Earth, like in an alien embassy area. There's another lovely cat species that's like a panther, and they walk upright, and they're basically scientists and archaeologists. So the one he talks about the most, she comes here looking for evidence of where her species has been on the planet. And in this 1971, right before one of these big conferences in Iran, she was looking for evidence because there were many species who said, "Oh, we created the humans. Oh no, we created the humans, so we should be in charge." Like there were 9 species who said, "Oh, we should be in charge because we created the humans," and her job was to find evidence about, okay, well, so who created the humans and who should be in charge? And basically, by the time she got to the conference, which I haven't actually read yet because he hasn't sent it to me, was no one alien species created us. Different species helped us thrive and may enhanced us a little bit, but they helped us thrive here on the planet. But no one alien species can say they're our God or that they created us so they should control the planet because we're here.
so did they enhance us for their own benefit, or was it for our benefit, or do you have any information on that?
It made it sound like it was more for our benefit. And again, he might have just sent me that section of the report. These reports he writes are pretty long, especially this one about the Iran conference. So the section that I recently got that I haven't read yet is just like the first day of the conference, and it's probably 1,000 pages in itself. Yeah. So the rest of the conference I don't have yet, so I'm not sure at what point she presented that information. But up to the conference, she's like going around exploring different places, trying to find this evidence she's looking for. So, but that's just a lovely cat species. There's a lovely dog species they look like hound dogs, and they're merchants, and they have a base in Australia. There are wonderful bug species. There's a huge, and these are kind of funny sounding, but there's a huge beetle species, um, and they have different like social caste levels, but the war beetle caste, they're soldiers, and they're about the size of a pickup truck, and they can, I don't think they fly because they're too heavy, but they can spew, they can spit plasma at you like if you're an enemy, so they'll melt you with plasma, and take away the threat. But they're also very helpful, and they were very helpful with the panther cat species. There's in 1978 there was a UFO that crashed in Bolivia. It was like Bolivia's equivalent of our Roswell, and on it was a lovely little insect beetle type species that looks like chocolate pudding. They look like what we call water bears here on Earth, but they're an interdimensional being that came here thinking our planet was not inhabited. They were tricked by another species, but they have the ability to cloak themselves and travel interdimensionally. So that other species wanted that, of course. But anyway, they came here. We had a first contact with them. Mark could see them totally cloaked. He could communicate with them. He, communicated with them and then helped go, get to the ship first before the other, human groups that were trying to get to it. So, but that was part of his job back in the 70s. So, yeah, just lots of different, and I don't even, there's so many other species, I don't even know all of them. And there's hundreds of species out there.
Yeah, I remember the one video I watched of yours on your website, and you went into a lot of different ones, and
Yeah.
yeah, I was just amazed. I was just like, wow,
I know. You saw a
one
picture
after
of
another.
gastrocell,
I'm sorry?
the blue blob gastrocell.
Yeah, just the cloud.
Well, there was a cloud. Those are vapor wisps. But then there's one where I have a picture, and it looks like a blob of bluish oil looking. And when they're in their colony, they look like a cloud, but as a single entity, they look like this blob of bluish, shiny, oily, and they're beautiful. But as one single, thing, it's just a big blob of oil. But anyway, they're pretty cool too.
That's amazing. And to me, I just look at life as energy, so everything's possible. So
And he likes the mantas too, so he's been friends with the mantas too. But there's things, the thing to remember is that um, they, how do I say it? Their appearance or their body is based on where they're from. So if they're from a gaseous planet or part of the galaxy, that they're going to have like a gaseous body. If they're from a water-based planet, they might be a whale type of thing. And there's stuff like that. So I'm assuming you saw the movie Arrival.
I did, but I think I fell asleep at the end.
Okay, but the thing looks like a really giant octopus, right?
Okay, yeah.
There are things out there just like that. And the scarier, I mean, that one seemed fairly friendly. The ones, they aren't necessarily friendly, And I know people have found like really giant octopus in the Antarctic. They didn't sound friendly at all. But there's oceanic species that look like dolphins and octopus. So they're not always. I mean, the dolphins are friendly. The octopus not necessarily. So they don't really trust us at all. So.
Yeah, I know there's a video out that just came. I don't know how long it's been out actually, but I just ran across it on YouTube that's talking about, and I'm sure you know what's going on in Antarctic with it, or have ideas of what's going on there. But I know I just watched some video. They were saying a creature just like what you're describing in a way was found there that was very uh, aggressive and I guess attacked a Russian scuba
Yeah,
diver.
I did watch that one. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very fascinating. I'm really curious on what's going on there. Do you have any knowledge about that?
He won't tell me a lot. Obviously, there are bases down there, and the Nazis or the Germans, whatever you want to call them, still have a base, a very active base down there in the Antarctic. Um, I know the Falklands War or conflict, whatever you want to call it, was because of alien activity and alien problems near that area, or like off of Argentina near the what is it, St. George? I don't know what it was called. Um, but, there was alien activity going on there that they had to deal with, hence the Falklands War. So there's been a lot of activity. There's a lot of alien stuff that has gone on in South America. So, and
Yeah.
I just came out with he just came out with a report about alien bases in Africa that I've only given one talk about so far. So it's like, this is really cool.
I think that's where I saw it. I saw something today. I was watching, I think, Carrie Cassidy today, and she was talking about it from an interview with you guys,
Yeah.
you and Mark. So, do you know what's going on in there right now, or?
I know the Reptoids have a base in North Africa. The Raptors, let me get this straight. The Raptors, okay, yeah. The Raptors and a group from Alpha Centauri have bases somewhere in the southern part of Africa. And like the mantas, and I forget the other one. Shoot. Maybe, I wonder if it's the ant people. Um, But there's like 4 or 5 species that have bases, at least regular bases there, and other species that come and go. And I only barely just read his Africa report, not beginning of what is this month, March, beginning of February. I gave a talk on it, and read through it pretty quickly to at least get the highlights for that talk. So I'll be doing that talk more often because it was very well received. And I know he's going to do a whole report on North Africa. This one was based on South Africa. And pretty much every country in South Africa, it seems, has alien activity or UFO sightings and a long history of, weird creatures being seen and things like that. So it's like you just don't hear about it as much because it's a pretty wide open area there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you just don't hear about until you start investigating, and then you're like, wow, that's that's in my backyard.
I know. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, in fact, I'm going to put a little plug in here if I might, because I don't know when this is going to air, but in June, there's a conference in Dulce, New Mexico. You should come.
Okay.
I'm going to be speaking, but it's June 23rd, 24th. It's put on by the Hickory Apache tribe there, and it's put on by a nonprofit, but it's right, right at the base of the Archuleta Mesa where the big Dulce base is. But I mean, even to this day, they have daily UFO sightings there, and not daily Bigfoot, but I mean, there's a lot of Bigfoot sightings there, and the lovely Native American people that live there, it's like they see stuff all the time, just all the time.
So, what is your information, or what do you know about Bigfoots and extraterrestrial activity? I mean,
I know a wee bit. Just, I mean, not as much as I know about other things, but I know that they are interdimensional. I know Mark's mentioned them in a few reports. I know in one of his reports there was like a couple on a base, and I think it was on Mars, talking with one of the alien commanders like about Mark. It's like, okay, so they know him. Everybody seems to know who my husband is. There was another time in the Bolivia UFO crash story, he had an interaction with one that was acting like as a bodyguard for an alien that came to meet with him. And I'm trying to think if there's other incidences, but to me, and I guess I know because there were some that showed up at the England conference when he was a little boy. So he said as long as you feed them or pay them, you can pretty well hire them. And I know that the Apaches, my friends, the Apaches, they were saying, some of them are nice and some aren't. So, again, like people, got negative and positive. So, but they sound very fascinating.
yeah, yeah, and it's just now that I'm delving into a lot of this a lot more, it seems that wherever there's paranormal activity and UFO activity, there seems to be Bigfoot activity as well too.
Right.
And so I'm finding that very surprising, and I definitely want to look into it. I mean, I'm very interested in Bradshaw Ranch. I went there not too long ago, but I want to investigate it more in Sedona, and then Skinwalker Ranch as well too. That one sounds very interesting as well too. So we'll see what I can find out about them.
And again, like the Dulce thing, what I love about this conference, because I spoke at it last year, there's a whole block of time, I think it's on the Sunday morning of the conference, where the locals actually are starting to get up now and tell their own stories about either Bigfoot or UFO or weird stuff, um, because they have been very hesitant to speak their stories, and now they're feeling more empowered to do so. And it is so beautiful to listen to the local people that live there, and this is part of their it's part of their culture, and this like Bigfoot came in my backyard last night type of thing, and it's like, or some go out in the woods and find their nests or their little homes and in the trees and things like that, and several of them have plaster casts of the footprint, and I was talking to the organizer's daughter last year, and she goes, yeah, we sit outside of our house every night and see UFOs going over, because I mean there's still stuff going on at the base. It's just I don't think to the level of what it was in the 90s when my husband was there, or the 70s when my husband was there, but I think there's still some stuff there because he doesn't want me to get too close to it. But yeah.
And that's pretty much probably with all the bases around here, like Area 51 and S4 and all of that. They probably quieted them down quite a bit, or put most of it underground since all this hoopla. Or
Yeah, well, I know I don't know a lot about Area 51, but I think a lot of that was taken other places, like because so many people were starting to talk about it or go there or see stuff. I think a lot of maybe some of the more secret stuff is somewhere else.
that would make sense to me as well too. I wouldn't keep it there unless I move it all the way underground.
There's an amazing amount of things that are underground, apparently. And yes, the huge tunnel systems, there is that, and you've got some kind of weird maglev train system that goes under everything, and it's amazing what's underground.
Yeah, I talk about that to my friends too. I mean, I remember as a kid driving out of town and traveling places, you would always see the convoy of all the army trucks and everything driving
Right.
down the highways. You don't see that anymore. So it only makes sense that they're driving in the tunnels and transferring them in the tunnels.
I used to get information from this guy who made it his business to basically spy on government installations with high level like electronic equipment and stuff. And he wrote some of it down for me, and I have a little booklet of some of his little escapades. But he would go places, he would ignore the signs that said, government stuff, don't trespass, and you'd see like vent things coming up out of the ground, or, so it was really interesting. And even so, I live near San Francisco, and the Army used to have Letterman Hospital right at the Presidio there, which is now built over by George Lucas's San Francisco facility. But before they tore it down, my husband said, "Go get pictures." It's like, okay, it's like one of your errands. Okay, sure, honey. And what was interesting, I mean, because he and his dad would go there as wounded soldiers or whatever. So they were treated there a lot of times. But also there was an underground portion of Letterman Hospital, so where a lot of weird stuff happened. And yes, I went there with his mom and took pictures of the abandoned hospital, but it was before they tore it down. And there were vents coming up from, like right out of the grass and things like that. It's like, well, yeah, okay, the guy knows what he's talking about. There's weird stuff. And so I can go places and get, okay, the weird vibe, like, yeah, this is not what it seems to be totally. And okay, yeah, the guy's telling me the truth. Well, he wouldn't lie to me anyway, but it's like, yeah, he really is telling me the truth. So, you know.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, we kind of got sidetracked with the different beings around here and stuff too. And I know we were talking a little bit about Mark, but if you don't mind, let's get back into Mark a little bit. And what was his job in the deep space programs, or what was he, hired out to do?
Part of it, I know, one of the titles I call him by is like a military space pilot. So he's often flown, and I don't know all the spacecraft that our government has. Like I said, I know he flew the Aurora. I know he flew some other things that were more top secret than that. He's flown some smaller, like interceptor size alien craft. He was also captain on one or two missions of one of our battleship size craft that we had as part of a fleet. And lo and behold, I've learned that there are numerous secret space programs, so there might be more than one fleet out there. But the only fleet I know about, called the Deep Space Fleet, had 9 battleship-size craft in it, and then smaller support craft. And it was designed in the 50s by one of his great uncles, and then another scientist. It was publicly closed. The program was publicly closed, and we had Apollo, which was the Apollo was a real program, but it was the cover for all the money passing through to the dark ops or the black ops. But you would have these ships that were launched with nuclear bombs, or you go assemble them, finish assembling them in space, but they would propel themselves initially with nuclear bombs, and that's one of the reasons why we had such a big stockpile of them. And then and some of them, the U.S. built and funded 2 of them, and then France, China, Japan, Germany, Russia, and then a couple of big corporations built and funded and supplied the others. And I'm not sure what happened to some of the ships. Got destroyed over the years in different battles. Some of them got upgraded with cooler engines or weapon systems or navigation systems. By the time one of the missions Mark was on in the 70s that I know about, they had outfitted his ship with an antimatter. I don't know that it was a weapon. I think it was more of an engine or a navigation thing, but it was an antimatter thing that his grandpa had designed in the 30s. So, pretty cool stuff that his grandpa was working on in the 30s. And that was just one of the missions. And he won't tell me what happened to all the ships, and he won't. In my head, I think the organization that ran it, he says it's defunct, but it's like, nothing ever really dies.
They probably just sold the spaceships off to somebody else.
I'm not sure, because if he's where he is and he can't be running it, then I'm not sure who's running it. I'll tease him. It's like, are you sure you're not running it from inside the prison? He's,
Mafia style.
no, he's not. So I'm not sure what happened to it. I can't imagine that the ships that didn't get destroyed are just, sitting out there waiting.
Yeah.
And I know that we have thousands of humans that are part of secret space programs. So, there are still humans doing things out in space. So sometimes when you hear of military guys getting killed in a training accident or whatever, they've gone off to be part of the secret space program. So they're not dead, but they have to be dead to their families.
Oh, okay, okay. I always wondered that maybe did they die in action out in space and then they declare them dead here, or do they
Sometimes,
just?
because if you've been in a top secret space battle, you can't tell your family that your family can't be told that's how you're killed. So all they know is it was a training accident or something like that. And a lot of guys right now coming back from the Middle East who have seen too much stuff, and I'm usually talking about aliens. Um, Sometimes they're given options. We can, wipe your brain of that information. We can kill you, or why don't you join the secret space program? And I think a lot of them opt to do that.
Yeah.
And also, there's hundreds of, and his Africa report brings us up, there's hundreds of thousands of humans who have been kidnapped and are out in space on other planets and things, and maybe they've been rescued by one species or another. So you've got at least a couple 100,000 humans hanging out in space right now.
So let me ask you this: do you know or have an idea about when we reached going out into space in the crafts, or were they kind of always here with our connections with the other beings, or what?
What I know is after World War II, the Air Force commissioned the RAND Corporation to design a rocket that could re-land back on Earth, kind of like what SpaceX just did. And Mark used to train in it and use the rockets as they were upgraded over the years. In the 50s, by the time he was a little boy at this conference in England, which was 1961, his new alien friends were saying, "Oh, we've known about you humans being in space now for years." So we've and the Orion spacecraft that, like I said, his uncle and the other scientists, Dyson and Taylor, designed, that was designed in the late 50s. So we've definitely been out in space, manned things, since the 50s, since way before it was public.
Okay.
And Air Force was probably doing it in the Moran rockets in the 40s. I just don't know how far they went.
Okay. Yeah, because I know I've heard stories as far back as, the 30s or whatever they say. I've heard that the Germans were in there, but, I don't know.
Germans were developing some cool stuff. I don't know how far out they went. I'm sure they have their own base on the moon, but I don't know what they have exactly. But I know they were developing some cool things because they tried to get Mark's dad to defect back over to Germany before the war broke out, and he declined and took a bunch of secrets home with him. So he was shown all kinds of stuff they were working on. So,
Amazing, amazing.
and alien help as well. So a lot of people know that.
Awesome. I did have another question, and then I got lost in thought.
Me too. There's so many directions to go.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, I don't want to steer off into another direction before we've covered everything that I really would love to get to. Um, I know there was something else important I wanted to ask you, something on that topic, but I'm brain dead right now on that. Let's go into. I heard you guys are at least with Carrie Cassidy, and I think one of your interviews, the Mobus timeline. Do you know what that is? Am I saying it right? The Mobius timeline?
That's probably more of a discussion between Carrie and Mark.
Okay, because I was kind of curious more of what it is and where that came from.
Yeah, and sometimes I kind of tune out when they're talking because they go at it, hard and heavy, and she's shooting one question after another, and the first time she was there, I took notes, and then after that, I said, "You're on your own for taking the notes. Just go get food and kind of watch the movies that are." I know it's rude. I kind of listen, but I know there's different timelines. There's several different timelines. I still don't understand. He's trying to teach me about the quantum of space and stuff, but space and time, and space is a fabric, and it's not just all a vacuum out there, and it's not all flat, and it's really cool, and he doesn't talk to me much about time travel, even though he's very well versed in it, I'm sure, um, and he's had his own experiences, I know, with that. But again, I don't know a lot about the details, and I haven't always listened to their discussions about it. But I know there are different timelines, and you can slip to the next timeline, but you've got to make it's not always, you can't just jump around necessarily. You have to be careful that it's you, the same you that left comes back.
That's important.
If I went to another parallel Earth or whatever, it might not be this me coming back. So.
That makes
But
that makes some sense.
I'm very yeah.
Okay, so let's go back then to what we as the human race means to these other beings and stuff. Because to me, I find it fascinating that if they're all out there and we're still sitting here, then we're sitting here for a reason. They didn't kill us off for a reason because I know they could if they really wanted to. And so, what purpose are we serving? Do they see us as something that is a potential, or are we just like a cockroach to them?
For many of them, I think we are just a cockroach. Some of them do want to interact with us because we might be interesting to them. To some of them, we're just food. To some of them, we're just slaves, or they want us to be slaves. For some of us, we're just science experiments. And for some of us, like I said, food already, okay. For some of us, they need us as breeding vessels because their species can no longer breed. So, some of them have bad environmental problems where they're from, and they're having reproductive problems. But again, sometimes they just like to come to Earth for vacation because this is a really cool planet, and they do come here for vacation. So, um, and they don't bother us. But some of them probably want to be our friends.
Yeah, I'm just curious on that, because it just, if we don't mean much to them, why are we here? Why don't they just come take the planet away from us? And, is there something stopping them overall from doing that?
Well, I think, and this is interesting because I can see my video moving. You have frozen again,
Uh-oh.
but but you can still hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. This Earth is in a very prime location, apparently, in our part of the galaxy. It's a great jumping off spot, like if you need to go somewhere else. So it's a prime location, but I think we do have ally species who are protecting us from just being taken over for whatever reason. Like for example, the Raptors see it in their best interest right now to be our friends. But the Reptoids see no reason to be our friends and want us to be a slave race or to send as many of us off planet to sell us off for food or other bad things.
Okay. So let me ask you this then really quick. So then I'm sure you're very familiar with like the Mayans and all, the predictions with that. And then if you go on the spiritual end that we're supposed to be evolving into, a new type of human being and all of that. I mean, does that coexist with what is going on there in space, or does that even make sense?
I don't really get into that end of things. So I don't have I don't have really have an answer for that. I know the raptors, for example, and several species are very Zen-like in their belief system. So while they may be meat eaters, they also believe that the universe is infinite and wonderful, and everything is connected. And even though you might not be able to see, you might be wise. And I have another great speech, a really good quote about that, just on how wonderful it is to be so connected and connected to the universe. And it just coming from a dinosaur, it is one of the most profound quotes that I love sharing almost every talk that I give. So But as far as, I don't hear a lot of information about, like consciousness and ascension type, most of the stuff I have is just very basic, very basic. This is what they're like. This is why they're here. This is the interaction that's happened so far. The military doesn't, the information I have doesn't necessarily get into totally their spiritual and philosophical beliefs and whether they believe in, raising consciousness or that. But I'm not saying they don't. I just don't know.
Okay. No, I get it. But I'm always curious about that, so I just wonder. And I also, we hear all this stuff in text and stuff like that about this evolution. And again, with what I've seen in nature, the way everything evolves and everything, and kind of the music scale and the octaves, it would make sense to us to evolve in a certain way. And so I just wonder if there was any information like that out there. But I can understand that, yeah, you got it more on the military side, and I don't think they would want to share that with us anyhow.
And what's interesting, though, another thing about the Raptors is they're very cultural. They love to do huge operas about their heroes and their history and stuff. So again, while they look like scary dinosaurs, they're very talented, and they're very proud of their heritage and who they are and what they've done. So they do a lot of cool things. And to me, part of evolving would be more like, okay, let's have a big community where a bunch of different things are walking around and we're friends. I don't know how, because I don't emphasize a lot on the, I'm spiritual, but maybe not in the way that you are type of thing. It's like I'm not promoting, I don't know.
No, I get it totally.
I have my own spiritual beliefs, but I don't really, that's not part of necessarily my whole UFO line of study and things like that, so I can't answer that kind of question.
No, I got it, but thank you for trying. Try to squeeze you for any information I can.
That's okay. I'm just telling you, I don't know.
Um, so what would Mark's kind of point of view, or even your point of view of our existence here, as far as what we got to look forward to with our relationship with other beings and what we have here? I mean, is it a productive thing, or what are we looking at?
It kind of depends. Um, I will say that according to a timeline or a chronology that he's given me as he's discussed these conferences with me, is that right now the government is not even planning to set a date for full disclosure until 2031. But and a lot of people think, okay, let's have disclosure now, and I think a lot of us are promoting disclosure and helping that to come about on a smaller level. But the thing is, if it happens before it should, or maybe is the best time for it, it's probably going to be violent. It probably won't be them just landing here and saying, hi, we're your friends, because they're not supposed to. So I don't know, I don't know what the future holds. Mark doesn't know what the future holds. I mean, he could probably tell you what it says on 12 different timelines, but who knows? Because if you start to predict things, somebody could change the timeline, and then, oh, well, your husband just lied. It's like, well, so he's not going to do that. He never predicts the future for me
No,
to
no,
say.
I could totally. I'm sorry.
I just say he never predicts the future and tells me it, and then expects me to share that, because that could come back on us pretty silly. But my vision for the future is, again, to have like a Dinotopia type place where I can have a big piece of property, and our alien friends are coming and going, and our human friends are coming and going, and we're having tea, and it's all a nice place to just interact and learn from each other. Again, if disclosure happens before it should on a wide scale basis, it might be very negative and unhappy, and it might be because there's some major violence that they cannot hide. So we need to be very careful about what we ask for.
Oh, I agree with you 100% there. Um, so, do you think when disclosure comes out, do you think that's going to be a good thing for us as a human race or a bad thing for us, or a little of both?
I think it just depends on the circumstances because again, it might depend on what kind of deals might have just been made, or I don't even know because I don't really know if it'll be a good or bad thing. It just really depends on the circumstances. Because, like I said, I know there's a lot of negative stuff going on in the Middle East right now, and if they can't hide that forever from the public eye or the cameras, then you might have disclosure way sooner than you want it to. Or if you need another species to come in and help, there may be a point where you can't hide what's happening there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
I keep forgetting where I was going to go with that. One is kind of off for where we were just at, but I'm just curious because I just heard this on something else I was listening to, and I've never heard this before. And since most of yours is on that military background, you might have some idea. I just heard what was I forget what I was watching, but they talked about at Roswell that we shot the UFO down and that we hit it with one of our missiles or cannons or whatever. I've never heard anything like that before. Me personally, I don't believe we could really touch their ships with what technology, at least that I know of. But what is your thoughts on that?
all I know about Roswell is not much. Because Mark won't talk about it, probably because his dad never talked about it. But I know his dad was part of an elite team that went down there to investigate it. Because blah, the teams that Mark's dad was involved with, especially the squad or the group from Hamilton Air Force Base, they went to investigate pretty much everything UFO related.
Okay.
But again, that's something Mark and a lot of stuff Mark's dad never told Mark. So if Mark has read the actual reports, because a lot of times he can read official reports, it's nothing he's going to tell me because there's a lot of stuff he still cannot tell me.
But I mean, the person that talked about that also said that at that point in time, we were shooting down a lot of different UFOs all around the United States and I think around the world. Have you heard anything about anything like that?
I haven't heard about a shooting down. I just know that, about that same time, there was a lot of UFO activity. And I know that his dad was stationed a lot of places where there was UFO activity going on. But like the one up in Washington, Whidbey Island, there was a big UFO sighting. His dad was involved with checking that out, and probably the Washington D.C. thing. And I know Mark's just said the Roswell thing, but he won't give me any details. So he hasn't really discussed with me like what we were shooting down, just the fact that there was UFO activity.
Yeah, I'm just curious on that because like I said, I've never heard anything about us shooting UFOs down before, and just my own belief on the technology that I've seen us have and possess, I don't see us being able to do that. And other things I've heard of, like even back in Vietnam, some of the stories I heard about that, and us actually firing on this one UFO that we couldn't hit it, and basically it took and returned our fire back at us, is what I heard on one of the stories. So that just makes me believe we can't really touch them at this point, or at least nothing with what I know.
I'll have to ask him, so you'll have to ask him to have me back on your show so I can try and give you an answer.
Okay. Well, we'll definitely do that.
No, I did. I wrote down your question, and I will definitely ask and see if he can tell me anything about that.
Okay, beautiful. Why don't we talk a little bit about your Earth Defense Headquarters and what it's about and everything, and what your goals are with that.
Well, I have this educational nonprofit, and like I said, the main goal is to share a little known history and information about, obviously I delve a lot with the military history. It's kind of evolved into that. We also get into magic arts and cryptozoology because it's all kind of related anyway. Um, I talk a lot about witches being in a lot of these things, and the fairy realm or elementals, because it's all interrelated and they always seem to be all at the same places. So those are kind of like my 3 or 4 main topics. I have numerous reports that Mark has written or at least provided to me, some about the more technical aspects about the space program or space equipment or propulsion systems, a lot of his missions, about the 2 main conferences he was at, and a lot about his missions. So, and then, some of the reports, because it wasn't always just supposed to be about UFOs, but we have a lot of some genealogy information, and I'm trying to think what else. Some of the things I don't have out there yet is like the report for Africa I just got, so I need to scan that and get it ready and available. I have a lot of, he started to write like almost an encyclopedia about the different types of species, which he wasn't able to finish and he had to send home to me before they trashed it. So, but it's, doable enough so that I've got, snippets of information about lots of species. And I have 2 websites, edhca.org and edhq.org. I'm kind of transforming it over into the second one because it's a more up-to-date website. I love to give talks to whoever will have me and pay my way there. And I'm at a lot of conferences, so just a lot of different information to share with people, if you're interested in this. And again, like I come at it from, here's what the military's had experience with. So it's definitely from the military point of view, and a lot of good information about what the different species are like, and even paranormal. I've had my own UFO sightings. I've never seen an actual alien in person, but I've had my UFO sightings. I have had a lot of fairy and paranormal experiences, so I'm not just saying what my husband tells me to say. I do have my own experiences, and so I bring a lot of that into that. So
Beautiful. So is most of that is on your website?
Yeah,
Okay.
it is not my own story. Definitely is not there. I'm write a book, write a book. Oh, yes. I'm going to be at UFO Con, which is here in San Francisco, March 23rd, 24th, 25th. It's like not the last weekend of March, but it's in a couple weeks. So that'll be a lot of fun. Tickets available for that. I'll be speaking in Dulce, New Mexico, like I mentioned, in June. And I'll also have a booth down in something called Portal to Ascension. It's a conference in Irvine, California, and that is in October. So those are the 3 next biggest things I have coming up that I can remember. And people are always, I'm available by email. So anybody has a question or whatever, I'm happy to answer them if I
Yeah, if
can.
you want to put out your links or anything right now, you're more than welcome to.
Yeah. So, the edhca.org and edhq.org, and my email is ecochicks@edhca.org.
Okay, and I'll also put it on the video as well too and edit it in so people can see it and get it really easy. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Anything that you want to get out or you feel Mark wants to get out to the public that would help? Or
Just there's so much. You and I could talk for 3 weeks and we wouldn't be done. But my main goal is to just help people understand that yes, this is real. UFOs are real. There are things on the UFOs. There are numerous civilizations out there in space. Yeah, no, they're not all going to be our friends, but it's fascinating to me. I'll back up and say, most people love what I say when I keep it to the planet. When I start talking about going out in space, it's like, she's crazy. It's like, well, if you believe there's a secret space program, and if you believe UFOs are coming here from somewhere, they've got to come from somewhere. That means they probably left a family or a civilization out there. So, it's worth opening your mind up to understanding the possibilities of what is out there. And there is so much out there that's just fascinating to learn about to me. So that's why I'm here sharing as much of it as possible. And
Well,
as you can see, once you get me started, you're not going to shut me up easily. So
I know how that is.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
definitely. I thank you for going out there and venturing out and giving the information to as many people as possible. Because it is a blessing to get information like this and have that understanding of what's out there. Because if you have some common sense, I think it's pretty easy to realize that there is more things out there in space than what we are led to believe to begin with.
and the one thing too that I would love to say is because I'm not scared to say this. Like, I would love to speak more. So if anybody in the audience, knows a conference organizer or has a group that can pay for me to come, I don't charge big fees, but I do need to have my, expenses covered and stuff. But I would love to get out and speak to as many places as possible. Um, I think what I have to offer, the information we have to offer, is valuable, and people do seem very interested in it. So I am available to speak, and I've got a speaker's bio I can send out. So, you know.
And yeah, you're right. We barely touched anything on what you have to say as well too. And I know I'm going to sit here and listen to this over and over again and get more questions for you because I definitely want to have you back on and go over more topics and get more in depth into other things.
Great, great.
Um, there's just so much information. I'm overwhelmed now.
Well, I mean, and you saw a few of my TV shows. I did like 32 episodes for my show on Project Camelot TV network, and it's like those were all intros into each of those topics. I mean, every talk I give, there's usually 1,000+ page report behind it. So, he's a writer, and he doesn't say it briefly. He's a really good writer, and they're really thick reports. But
Well, I know I'm definitely going to have more questions for you in the future here because for me, I'm just laying the groundwork and trying to understand where everything's at and trying to get a footing here. And then I'll definitely have a lot more questions.
great.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time because I know we've been here for almost 2 hours now.
I got to get back to the tax work.
Oh, well, maybe then you do want to stay another 2 hours.
Well, I do, but I really need to get back to the other thing. I got clients clamoring at me, so
No, I understand that. And again, I thank you so much for your time.
thank you for.
Uh, Definitely send my regards to Mark for me and tell him I'm really blessed that he is sharing this information with us and stuff and just the great work that he's done for all of us. I mean, it's just a blessing to know that somebody's out there fighting for all of us that, he doesn't even know us and he's fighting for us. I love that. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
most welcome. I will tell him.
All right, well, we will let you get going. Thank you for the information, and I will get in touch with you here soon because I would love to have you on again.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Anything else that you want to plug or anything before we get cut
No,
it off?
I think we're good. Come to UFOCon if you're in the San Francisco area or not.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm going to try to be there for the Dulce one. That will be right around when I'm traveling to some other ones. So I know I'll be at Contact, so maybe I'll stop there first.
I would love to meet you in person.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Joanne. You have a wonderful night, and we will talk to you soon.
Okay, take care.